Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hidden Hockey Podcast. Again, my name is Matt Gordon. For those that are new to the channel, please do yourself a favor. Please subscribe on YouTube, follow me on Twitter, or follow me on Instagram. I'm getting close to 100 followers on Instagram and Twitter. Really appreciate you guys spreading the word and those discover my content and wanting to share along and follow along with me. So, just want to say thanks to everybody who does that and really appreciate that. So. Going into today, we're going to talk about a few different things. We're going to talk about the Western Hockey League draft that just concluded about 3 hours ago. We'll talk a little bit about the U.S. prospect draft that also happened this morning for the WHL, or the Western Hockey League. And then we'll talk about the USHL Phase 2 draft that happened 2 days ago and give a recap over, what teams I thought did well, prospects that came out of here that might be of interest to you in the not so distant future to watch in the USHL, and I'll give my input in terms of what teams did really well and what teams maybe didn't do so well. So starting off here, we're going to talk about the Western Hockey League, the normal draft that just concluded. Go ahead and talk. The big thing and the big news coming out of today was last night actually was the first round. So the big news coming out of last night was the fact that the Regina Pats found a way to get the two best players in this birth year. Maddox Schultz and Liam Pugh. Both guys are very, very high-quality players. Both of them could have probably been candidates for exceptional status. And the ability to get two of those players at the same time, at the same draft, and have them for 2 years before their draft year is pretty unbelievable. They're going to have a real opportunity here to really take advantage of, their time frame in terms of having a championship, going to the Memorial Cup, and doing a lot of different things that are going to be really important for them going forward in the future. So obviously the first pick with Maddox Schultz. With Maddox Schultz, you're getting a kid who's an extremely, extremely skilled hockey player. Really has already gotten national TV coverage in Canada at the age of 14. Really impressive temperament. Seems like he comes from a great family, known for his exceptional skating, known for his bigger frame. They have him at 5'10", 165. He looks to be about 175, 180 pounds in my opinion, and probably closer to 5'11". But you're looking at a kid who's well beyond his years. Played at the U18 level as a 13-year-old last year and actually had some pretty good success. This year was given exceptional status to play in the under-18s and did an incredible job there. Unbelievable pick there by Regina there. And then to go ahead and trade up to get Liam Pugh. Liam Pugh is somebody who's really come on the radar in the last 12 months. Unbelievable talent in terms of what he's been able to bring to the table. You look at him, he's got a great shot, really good skating ability, not afraid of anybody. He's played up for a few years now. Really, really impressive player in his own right. And having those two together and them being your 1 and 2 seed should be really fascinating for Regina. And, they've really, really made a huge change in their franchise by having both of those guys. Edmonton kind of shocked with Holden Wouters here. It was a surprise pick by many. I mean, a lot of people had him in their first round. He was definitely a quality player, but nobody had him really at 2. So it was a very, very confusing start to the draft there after, a clear consensus number 1 in Maddox Schultz. Going into the rest here, and then Penticton decided with their first pick to take Thor Lifferton. And with Thor Lifferton, another guy who I would have expected more in the second or third round, gets his selection with Penticton and becomes the first ever pick for the new Penticton franchise. Overall, looking at the rest of the draft here, Reed Nickel was an excellent pick by Everett. And then, getting good value here at 6 for Vancouver was getting Louis Oscar Holowaychuk. He's a little bit smaller, but he's an unbelievable playmaker, probably the best playmaker in the draft, really skilled, good overall potential. The sky's the limit with him. As long as he's able to grow a little bit more, I think he'll be really successful at the junior level. It's just going to be a matter of, can his frame hold up? Reed Nickel is definitely an advanced player in his own right. I think, in other years he might have been considered a really good number 1 overall candidate. But he's with a loaded birth year this year. The 2010 birth year in the Western Hockey League is really impressive. There's a ton of really talented players that, they've really landed on the radar, and they've done an amazing job playing up, as high as 3 or 4 years above their age and done really successful things. So, that was a pretty shocking, to see him go down to 5. I thought for sure he'd be a little bit higher and, potentially be somewhere in the 3rd or 4th areas there. So, and then you go to a few other players here. You got, the Northern Alberta Extreme was an unbelievable U15 prep team this year. Had a lot of really good overall players and skills within that roster. I think they went like 34-1 this year. Obviously, they were led by the 2 Dynamo defensemen and Cruz Jim and Nolan Walitsky, 2 tremendous WHL-ready defensemen. With Walitsky, you got the speed, you got the skill. Really unbelievable player. He's already got a pro frame, just needs to build a little bit more muscle. And then you have a guy like Cruz Jim, who is an incredibly elusive player. Looking at him, is a really skilled offensive defenseman, definitely a power play 1 guy, no question, in the Western Hockey League. Already exhibits exceptional skating, great edge work. Should be really exciting to see what he's able to do going into the rest of the year here. And then, there was a ton of guys from the Northern Alberta Extreme selected. Another guy that I was really high on was Kalen Miles, who went to Wenatchee. Athens Shingoose, I've caught games of him. I really like his game. I think he's really skilled. Tegan Bouchard, another kid from that really impressive Northern Alberta U15 prep team. You go down the list here, a ton of really good prospects you saw and different players. I was pretty shocked to see Cole Andreville fall into the 2nd round. I was expecting him to be anywhere from, 15 to 19, and for him to drop, just outside of the 1st round, but at 25 was pretty surprising. And then another guy who I thought would be in a lot of people's 1st rounds was Walker Filowich. I thought for sure that he was going to land, around the same spot as Cole. He fell a little bit later in the 2nd round, but Calgary gets a really good value pick there in getting Walker Filowich. As far as teams that I thought did really well, ones in particular I was really impressed with were my notes here, I apologize. Regina obviously went out and did an unbelievable job in getting, both Schultz and Pugh. Another group that I really liked and what they did. Well, I thought Tri-City had a really great draft. Really liked Cam Lukes as well. But far and away, to me, the best draft was by Regina, and it's hard to beat any sort of progress that Regina did today. They really went and made a franchise-changing draft for them. It was pretty impressive to see that kind of ability come to the Regina Pats. Is they're very familiar with that with Connor Bedard and the times and moments that they've had in the last few years with him. To leave him and lose him a couple years later, get Maddox Schultz and Liam Pugh. You can't ask for more as a junior franchise. Some other players that, were sneaky picks, I thought. Going down here, we'll talk a little bit more about some guys that I really liked. Ahmad Fayad, another kid from that Northern Alberta team. I had about, if anybody looked at my watch list on Instagram or saw the post I made on YouTube yesterday, I think I had like 10 or 12 kids in my top 24 from that Northern Alberta Extreme team. Really unbelievable and impressive team, and obviously the results showed in the way these kids were drafted as well. But really like Ahmad Fayad, really great goal scorer, good ability, just a lot to like there. Dylan Coulter Seti is another guy who put up a ton of points at the U15 AA level. One of the better kids coming out of Saskatoon this year. Really liked his overall game, and I thought that was a really good value pick by Kamloops. Carter Gibson, one of the better goalies in this draft as well. Big kid already at 6'4" and almost 200 pounds. A lot to like with Carter Gibson as well. Ton of skill, great ability as well with him. Going through here, there's a couple kids, if you want the extremes on who the prospects are. A couple kids that were drafted, they were 6'6", 6'7". Really impressive frame. And people have to remember these kids are 15 years old, and you got 6'6" and 6'7" kids getting drafted, which is pretty insane. You don't know if they've hit their top end growth. I would assume they're pretty close though, because to see a bunch of Chars out there would be pretty unbelievable. But that's my overall thoughts in terms of guys from the Western Hockey League prospects draft that went today and yesterday. Going now to the U.S. Draft, we're going to talk a little bit more about some players that are eligible there. Just wait for it to load. My apologies. Let's reload it again. All right, so for the U.S. draft, teams that I thought did really well, my clear and away favorite I thought was Moose Jaw. You look at the selections had here. R.J. Thompson is a kid who played with Liam Pugh at the World Selects Invitational this past week. Looked pretty good with him as well. Didn't watch full games of him, but statistically did really well and felt like he kept up with that group. Played for Little Caesars this year at the U14 level and honestly was one of their more impactful players. Edmonton goes and gets Zeke Cable, playing in the Dallas Stars U14 Elite program. This is a kid who's been on the radar for WHL scouts as well as USHL scouts now for a couple years. Always been a leader in the age group. Should be really fun to see what he's able to do in the Western Hockey League should he decide to go there. Penticton makes a nice claim here, and I thought he's one of the better players that will be on that existing roster in Carter Morris. A kid from Alaska. It's cool to see that there's some Alaskans that are getting some notoriety here, and should be really impressive to see where he's able to go. I think he's a really impressive player, got a ton of talent, and should be a really impactful player for Penticton, within 18 months. Going into through the rest here, Jake Mintenko, big kid at 6'3", 190 pounds. Just a goal-scoring machine. Been a really impactful player for the Colorado Rampage the last couple years. Got a ton of respect for what he's able to do and what he's been able to be as a hockey player. Looking forward here, we got Henry Bootweiler. The Regina Pats go ahead and get him as well. I thought Regina had a really good U.S. priority draft as well today. Henry Bootweiler should be a really impactful player coming from that Minnesota Blue Ox team that went to the U14 Nationals and ended up winning the championship over Shattuck St. Mary and a bunch of other really good teams. It was cool to see that, a bunch of kids from Moorhead in a city-developed area found their way against these super teams to win. And he was a very impactful player in that Nationals tournament. Cruz Armstrong is Colby Armstrong's kid. He played for the Pittsburgh Penguins elite program, and then I think he played for Mount St. Charles. They have him here as playing for Mount St. Charles, and I think he played a little bit with them, but he was kind of bouncing back and forth between the two, but a pretty good player in his own right, going to the Seattle Thunderbirds. Like that overall, potential that's out of him, and I think there's a lot to say in terms of what he can bring to the table. These next two picks here with Spokane and Portland, Maverick McKinnon has already really shown himself at the Minnesota high school level. Should be a really, really impressive player. Already over a point per game as a freshman. I would expect him to make a real claim to go to Portland next year. I think he should be a guy who plays in the Western Hockey League and probably becomes an immediate impact player if he finds the right situation. And then Parker Colmer has been one of the leading players in the U14 team for Shattuck. Parker is a guy who, is an all-around really talented player, very good defensively, but also has a great offensive game. Comes from Kansas, which is really cool to see. You don't see a ton of kids getting drafted from Kansas, but being able to come from Kansas, play at Shattuck St. Mary, make the adjustment, and then become a really big leader in that group is it says a lot about who he is and the player he is as well. Going through here, some more names. A kid who I don't know much about, but it was an interesting draft was Tyler Coons, the second round pick for Regina. A kid who played, in North Dakota, playing AA hockey for the Grand Forks Aviators. Looking up statistics, he was over a point per game at the AA level. Had some AAA time as well. But a big frame kid and somebody who I don't think a lot of scouts really knew about. So really savvy drafting there by Regina. I thought that was a really impressive player to pick up. And, was just really curious to see what he's able to do at the WHL level. And then two more guys I want to mention. Daniel Makovitsky. He's listed here at 5'5" and 186. I think this is a wrong measurement here. I actually think, I wouldn't want to guess his height and weight. I don't know what it's at, but, he's a guy who, for Star Hockey Academy, has been a really impactful player the last 2 years. One of the more dominant, forwards that's produced really well in the varsity level for the Scholastic Hockey League, as well as, he's started to produce at the U15 prep level. Going into this year, a kid from Washington, somebody who's a really impressive player in his own right. And it's cool to see that, more kids are coming out of these, niche areas in Kansas and Washington and Montana and a few other places as well. And then the last guy I want to talk about is Damon Linkow's kid, Derek Linkow. Played for the U14 Phoenix Coyotes. Obviously, the bloodlines there are pretty strong. Statistically, he was pretty impressive as well, but that's a really great pick there by Moose Jaw. I thought Moose Jaw had a really good 2 picks here in the US draft. It was really cool to see what they were able to do and how they were able to make him, get him as late as they did. And it's great to see what kind of player is going to come out of Damon Linkow, or Derek Linkow, sorry. Going now into the USHL Entry Draft here. I'm going to go ahead and share my other tab instead. Loading it up here. And going into the entry draft here, I got a few players. We're going to talk about, kind of what teams did really well, other teams that didn't do so hot. But there was a lot of really interesting picks in this draft. I liked a lot of what was done. For those that saw my recap on the USHL Futures Draft, if you didn't, it's, you can find the link. It's the previous video and the previous live stream I did on this channel. But I had a lot to say about, what Lincoln did in the Futures Draft. And I thought in terms of this draft here as well, the big team for me that made the entry draft really did well, I thought, at the, the Phase 2 draft was Sioux City. I thought Sioux City had an unbelievable draft in terms of getting really impactful guys very quickly into their roster. And Sioux City's always been a really good development environment, and it's good to see that there is more that can be done and more players that can come out of Sioux City. And clearly they have a way of identifying talent and making them produce and making them become a really good area to produce and develop your prospects. So first pick I want to talk about here is, obviously the first pick was a couple guys from the under 18 national program in London Hayfley and Garrett Lindbergh. 2 guys that I think really deserve to, have their opportunity here in the USHL on a different team. I think given a bigger role, they're going to be really impactful players, and it should be interesting to see what they're able to do in Green Bay and Chicago, respectively. Omaha goes and takes a big swing. They take the Kazakhstan player that played for the Cleveland Barons and Yegor Kim. Really good player. He's been here now in North America for 2 years, probably precipitated by the war and wanting to find more development opportunities. He went ahead and decided to make his move to North America and has been really just an unbelievable goal scorer through the last 2 years. He's got a great shot. Shifty, has a lot of, innate skill and innate hockey sense. Should Omaha turn themselves around from a management perspective, I think there's a lot to like with Yegor Kim, and I think he could really be a very impactful player for them, possibly even as soon as next year. Going into number 7 here, the Fargo Force skid, Bodie Semper. Semper is a guy who he was already, before this draft, was already committed to the BCHL. Now gets drafted very highly into the USHL. You'd have to think he's going to go to Fargo. But this is a kid who, everybody talks about the offense with this kid, but, defensively, he's very, very impressive. Everybody's, he's, I think, one of the better 200-foot players that was drafted. Somebody who I think is the most ready to step into the USHL and be an impactful player from day one. I would expect him to be a top 6 forward for Fargo. I think he'll be a really intriguing player to watch going into not only this year's draft, because he's eligible this year, but should he not get drafted, I think he's a very good candidate to be an overage candidate next year, and see more opportunity once more scouts become more aware of his game. Noringer here was selected. Victor Noringer just committed to Boston University this morning, and has also got the was also drafted by Muskegon in the first round. Earlier this week. Muskegon obviously likes to go international with a lot of their picks, and they don't mind taking swings on Russians or any sort of early nationality. They as long as you're a really skilled and talented player, they're going to find a way to get you over to North America, and their environment's really safe there in terms of it's a really good development spot for a large majority of people that come internationally. 13 here, we got Itu Arpana. I had him really high on my draft radar earlier this year. He dropped off a lot for me, but he's definitely still worth a late round pick. Had a pretty good U18s. Wasn't as impactful as you would like him to be, but still produced decently well. I think he's probably going to play in the under 20s either next year or the year after. But I think there's a lot to like with him. Should he come to the USHL and play for the Dubuque Fighting Saints, I think it's a perfect environment for him. A well-rounded 200-foot player, does everything you need to do, and he's a coach's dream. Should be really interesting to see how he's able to adjust to, the National Hockey League. So going in here now, we go into the 32nd pick here. The second round had some interesting picks, but just nobody that I really felt like I needed to talk about to an extreme degree. 32 is where it got interesting. Sioux City went and took their first swing, and they got Elias Strome-Vatne, the 06 born. He's been really talented now and really touted for a few years. Has been in Sweden for the last couple years now, and apparently committed to UConn for next year. I have a feeling with him being selected by Sioux City here, he wants another year before he jumps and makes his move over to UConn. Really good at the under 20 level in the national, the J20 national for Farjestad. Him and Michael Eriksson were two guys that did really impressive things for not only Farjestad but also for the Norwegian under 20 hockey team. I think there's some draft notoriety with him. I think he's somebody who should definitely be considered for a draft pick, if not a camp invite. But a really skilled player. Not the biggest guy. He's probably about 5'10", 170 pounds, but he brings it every night. He's very, he's got a great effort, great work ethic, great, level of energy. He brings it all the time, and he's also very creative with the puck and a great skater. There's a lot to like here. I just think, with him being undersized, people think it's a bit of a risk. And, that's okay. But, sometimes you have to take big swings. And Sioux City, this was the first of many they took in the draft here. So going into the rest here, we're going to go ahead and talk about another Norwegian, then going to the Muskegon Lumberjacks and Nicholas Armolson. Armolson to me is a guy who is a definitive first rounder in 2026. Should he come over to the USHL and get a lot more eyeballs on him, I think he's going to be a very, very well thought of prospect. Should immediately have a major impact in the USHL should he decide to come over, but he's also got a great opportunity in Sweden, playing, I believe, for Örebro. Just an unbelievably skilled and talented player. One of the better players at the under-18s this year for Norway. I had over a point per game and was easily the best player on the ice through any time Norway played in the tournament. And it should be really cool to see what he's able to do going into the rest of this year. But should Muskegon get a way to find their way and get him over here, I think there's a lot to like with what Muskegon did in terms of taking these big swings on guys. I think Muskegon was my second favorite draft behind Sioux City, and I'll talk about a few other teams I thought did really well as well. Going now to pick number 64. One of the shorter players in the draft, but somebody who, is just a little jitterbug and a water bug, is Emilio Bedoya. Just a really skilled, talented player. Yes, he's about 5'4", and he's closer to 17 years old. He probably will not get bigger than 5'6", but, people have succeeded at the USHL level at 5'4", 5'5". Look at guys like Rocco Grimaldi, Daniel Dezaniev. There's a ton of really gifted players, and Sean Doogie's another one. They've all played at shorter sizes, and if the talent's there, they're able to survive at the USHL level. I would fully expect that Emilio Bedoya is going to be a fan favorite and should really be very, very well liked in Tri-City. Going on now to pick 70, we got Mr. Ruben Vesterling, drafted by the Cedar Rapids Rough Riders. Ruben had a little bit of an adjustment issue to the under 20 level. Jer Gardens had a really talented group at the under 20 level. Sometimes Anton Friedel would come down and play at the under 20s, and you get Victor Eklund sometimes would do the same thing. And then on top of that, you got guys like Arvid Drott and a few others that, they ended up eating a lot of time on the roster. And that led to Westerling being more of a J18 candidate and somebody who played a lot more there. A lot to like with him. I think there's just a really good skill set. He's a super, super gifted offensive hockey player, and somebody who, I have a lot of time for. I think his development path is going to be a little bit longer, but, he'll find his way because I think the skill is really there, and I think there's a lot that he can give a hockey team for sure. Go ahead now. You see the Grieva twins here were selected. I don't have a lot of hopes for the Grieva twins. I think their skating needs a ton of work, but it should be interesting to see where they're able to go from here. Some other picks here. I'm going to go into the 7th round now. If you guys want to mention here, one guy in particular that I was not expecting to be drafted, but I think they're taking swings here. There's two guys here. So Maceo Phillips went at 114. Another development program kid. 124 was Jake Stewart. The two guys I want to mention here are the last 2 picks of the 7th round. One in Adam Zhidlitsky from Youngstown. Really interesting to see that they would go after a guy who played largely in the OHL for Kitchener. Adam Zhidlitsky was a really talented player, definitely somebody who's going to be on some NHL draft radars, no question. Just a weird selection here in the 7th round. I wonder if they know something we don't. But it's very curious to see that he'd be selected here. Should he decide to come over to Youngstown, I mean, this is going to be a steal of a pick for them. But it's a nice low-risk, high-reward pick that they're deciding to do, and it's an interesting draft strategy for, a front office that typically tends to take chances on guys and put themselves out there the best foot forward. And Youngstown's really smart in terms of acquiring talent like that. And then Omaha goes with Jock Bukovic, who's a Slovenian-born player. Played for the Vegas Golden Knights. I believe they're under 16 program. An interesting player in his own right. I think he's an 08-born. And, I just think there's more to his game. I think there's more that he can do. Coming from the environment he came from, I just see a lot more in his game. Pick 129 here. You got Chicago Steel. Go ahead and they get a diminutive guy in Dustin Vilhoft. He's 5'8" and about 130 pounds, but my God, it's just get a buttload of skill. Really gifted offensively, great hands. Very hard to get him off the puck, despite the fact that he is a little guy. The sky's the limit with a guy like Dustin Vilhoft. It's not a matter of the frame or the skill set that he has. He's just got to be able to really manage his game and really maintain, a great skill set in terms of, he will be able to handle the junior environment, no question. It's just a matter of finding his game later on. There's a ton of like here with Dustin Vilhoft. He's definitely going to be a guy who's going to be, really high thought of in German ice hockey circles. And at the very least, if he doesn't make the National Hockey League, he will be an excellent European hockey player, playing in the higher up European leagues, whether that be in the DEL, the KHL, the SHL, wherever he finds his way, he will find his way eventually. 131, another pick I love from Sioux City is Pavel Martinu. 6'5", 200 pounds, and played for the Seacoast Performance Academy. Over a point per game, and was very impressive in his showings I've seen of him. I think he's a very, very good skater. Somebody who I think could immediately come into the USHL and be a very impactful player in a middle six fashion. He doesn't have the top end skill you would like to see, which is why I think he didn't go in last year's draft, despite being in North America and being a part of the Seacoast Performance Academy. But it'll be really curious to see what he's able to do going forward here. In the rest of this, the rest of his career here. I think, he's going to play D1 hockey. I believe he already has a commitment to somewhere. I don't remember where offhand. But he will be a guy who I think will be a very, very impactful USHL player should he decide to come to the USHL. 136 here, you got Macklin Egret, who played for the, I believe he played for the Slex Academy. Very good player as well, really gifted. Smaller guy, but a great skater. Just a ton to like with him there in Waterloo. I think there's a really good opportunity for him to grow and develop his talent. And it should be really interesting to see what he's able to do going the rest of this year. 149 here. We got 149, 150. We got back-to-back picks here. I want to talk about both of them. Doman Krzysztof Schwankov plays for Hungary and plays in Finland right now for the Kuku Under 20 roster. Had some near pro time this year. I think he actually suited up a couple times for Kuku in the Liga. But recently, he played in the Olympics for the Hungarian national team as a 16-year-old, which is pretty unbelievable, especially in an important tournament where you're qualifying for the Olympic Games. And they felt like this kid was one of their best 20 players coming out of the country. That's really a very, very interesting staple. And was recently just named to the World Championship roster for Hungary. So, he's going to be 16 years old. Apparently could be one of the youngest players to play in the World Championships since, I think it's been like 40 or 50 years. So for Doman, he's a guy who's got an incredible skill set, great playmaker, not the fastest guy in the world, doesn't have the greatest boots, but my God, is he a straight line skater. He can really force his will in the corners. He's not afraid to get in the dirty areas. Really tough player in his own right. And I think there's a ton to like with a guy like Doman Krzysztof Schwankov. I don't know that he will leave his situation, but it was a nice swing by Fargo to consider him. Mikolas Gadauskis, the Lithuanian, was the next overall pick here at 150. Another pick here by Sioux City. I would expect this kid to come over to that USHL. I just have a weird feeling he's going to. Boatload of skill, been incredible internationally. Came over to Sweden as an adjusted, really adjusted for Tabi, and just a ton of really impressive potential out of this kid. Coming from a non-traditional hockey country like Lithuania, being able to make an impact like he has in Sweden and potentially North America, I have a ton of time for a kid like him. I think he's a very, very skilled player and somebody you're going to want to look forward to watching in the coming years. 159 here in the 10th round here. We got Philip Novak for the Chicago Steel. Another kid, just like Aaron Wilson, should be a really high-end pick in 2026. I would expect him to be on the verge of the first round, if not early second. Has been very dominant at the Czech under 20 level. Almost a point per game as a 16-year-old. Isn't very common. Apologize for my dogs here, but they're barking a storm. Philip Novak is a guy who's a really elite playmaker, great skater, has a ton of potential in terms of his overall game. Should he come to North America, I think he would be a very, very immediate impact in the USHL. I think he's got a lot of really advanced skill sets within his game, and somebody who, with a little bit of development, I think could go a long way. Going now here into the rest of the draft here, there's a bit of a lull in terms of guys I thought that were really impactful. And also, I'm not looking at Vladimir Trevecki here. He had a really disappointing U18s. I don't think he would want to come over to North America. A lot of these tend to be swings. I'm not so sure that there are going to be opportunities and situations for these guys to be playing in the USHL. Some late round guys I want to talk about. One in particular here is Cal Conway, the 13th round pick here for Waterloo. Really impactful goaltender at the at the Minnesota high school level. Transferred from Andover to Stillwater for some personal reasons. Had a bit of injury concerns to start the year, and then had an unbelievable Minnesota high school state tournament. Was really, really solid for them. I think, got them pretty far. I don't know if they won the championship. I'm blanking in terms of whether they did or didn't. But you heard a lot of good things about this kid in terms of what his game was able to be. He's a bigger frame at 6'3". He could need some time in the null. But overall, I think he's got real USHL upside. And, I had him in consideration for the NHL draft this year before the transfer situation and different concerns happened. I just think there's more time needed with him. I think he's somebody who, though, you pick him this late, and I think there's a lot of great things to like with him. And then 212, the very next pick, you got Will Keene. Comes from Orchard Lake St. Mary, which is a Michigan high school team. Michigan high school doesn't really get drafted with the USHL, so it's a really uncommon pick. But this kid's a huge frame, 6'5", 200 pounds, 16 years old. Has if he wanted to, he could even play high school hockey next year. But he's already proven to be pretty dominant at the high school level. Muskegon gets a really savvy pick here in their own backyard. I think it's a really impressive look to see that they were able to get him so quickly and in such a great way. And it should be fun to see what he's able to do going into the rest of this upcoming year. The big guy, the big topic, if you will, Alex Karmanov, the Moldovan-born, 7 foot tall, 274 pounds, but could skate. Honestly, for his size, it's a miracle that he isn't walking like a bunch of a stack of bricks. Like, he just finds his way. Great stick. I think he covers the ice really well. Defensively, I think he's a lot better than he's given credit for. His offensive game still needs some work, but just because of sheer dominance, he's been able to do some really impressive things, and it's fun to see what he's able to do going forward here. I think there's just a ton of potential and great skill, and Alex Karmanov is a guy who I have a lot of time for. I think he's a very impressive player. I think there's a ton of skill, and I got a lot to like with him. Sky's the limit. He's going to go to Penn State and play the D1 level, and I have a lot of time for somebody like him. The last guy I want to talk about here is 246, Harrison Smith. This is the rare situation where a guy's already played in the USHL and gets drafted. He played the NAL for the Maryland Black Bears earlier this year. He's an 06 born. Had a really dominant year the year prior in the Florida Alliance U18 program. Over 100 points in that season, comes to the NAL, has a really good playmaking season, becomes one of the best playmakers in the NAL, and has 5 goals and I think like 37 or 38 assists in 39 games, something like that. I don't know the exact stats, but he was over a point per game. And towards the end of the year, Youngstown found him and wanted him to come and play at the USHL level, and he nearly averaged a point per game at the USHL level. Another underrated player, very skilled, very elusive, gets around you very easily. Awesome stick handler. The only thing is his speed isn't the greatest. I think it's USHL average, but it's not enough for him to separate himself as much as he should. Very high IQ player, somebody who's very cerebral in terms of the way he thinks the game. But I'll be really curious to see what he's able to do and how he's able to adjust to the USHL. And I think this is a very safe pick and somebody who's absolutely going to make the roster next year. So that's kind of my recap of the 3 drafts. In terms of other teams I liked Fargo a lot. I thought Chicago took some nice swings. Omaha made a couple of selections that were really interesting. It's just a lot of really interesting and intriguing players that have gone for this year. I think Dubuque was a little bit safe in their drafting. Felt like Des Moines didn't really get anybody of note. Just an interesting year and very surprising to see, the players that were selected some of the players that were selected this year. And I felt like a lot of kids that were really talented, that were 07s and 08s, kind of got left out and not drafted for whatever reason. If I obviously, we got one viewer here. We had a few other viewers that were coming in and out. If you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know in the comments below. If you're watching a recording, please do yourself a favor. Please subscribe to the channel. Really appreciate it. We're trying to grow this as fast as we can and as much as we can, get as many hockey nerds under our belts as we can. And, I just want to keep pushing and putting out more draft coverage next month in the going into the NHL draft, I'm putting out a lot more draft related coverage, working on maybe getting some partnerships with some other creators and different people. So we might see that going forward. Just really like what the content and the way it's been going so far, but the focus will be mostly on the NHL draft and different players to watch for going into this year's draft. In terms of questions, again, feel free to leave them on the side. They don't have to be USHL related, they don't have to be Western Hockey League related, and they don't have to be American Draft related. If you have questions in regards to a prospect you want to talk about, or you want to get into more about some different things you're seeing in the development world, I would love to be able to chat with you. If you have any video ideas, feel free to leave them on the side, or leave them as a comment below. Would really appreciate those that are tuning in and doing what they can to help support me and get this channel really going. And so I'm going to go ahead here and we'll talk a little bit more. I'm going to probably talk for another 20 minutes or so, just about some different things I'm seeing in the development world. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and just talk to you directly. So I'm going to go ahead and flip it back here. And let's see here. There you go. As far as the direction of the channel goes, I'm going to be doing more international hockey content as well. I'm going to go probably not immediately, but we'll talk more about the overall year and what's been had internationally, different countries and where I see their development going. Any sort of coverage in terms of international tournaments, things like that. That'll be more things I focus on this summer. Obviously, the draft is going to be an important thing. I might do some small stuff around players going into 2026 and some previews for that year's draft. And then, just keep talking about, some different things I'm seeing through the niches of hockey, through different things that, different reactions to things. I might go into a little bit more about the NCAA and the CHL agreement and how it's been impacted a year later, how leagues have adapted, what are the future trends that I'm seeing or what I'm predicting to be the case. And it should be really interesting to see what we're able to talk about and come up with. And I'd love to hear from you guys as well. I'd love to hear your ideas, really keep you guys engaged and really keep you interested and keep the content fresh for those that are either long-term subscribers or people that have been a part of this from the very beginning. So, I thought I was going to talk more, but, I think I'm going to cut it short tonight. Again, if you guys want to talk more about the draft coverage, let me know. Leave some comments below. Would love to hear from you. Otherwise, really appreciate you guys for being on here and staying in tune with the content. And, please do yourself a favor. Please subscribe to my Instagram. Subscribe to me on Twitter as well as on YouTube. So if you're new, welcome. Please comment. Please keep yourself engaged. I'd love to hear from you. And let's grow this community a little more so you have a few more friends to talk about prospects with. And with that being said, have a good night. I'll be probably putting up a stream here in a few weeks. I'm going to take a little bit of a break. But otherwise, thanks for commenting on the content. Thank you again for engaging. And please do yourself a favor. Please share the content. Please subscribe. And let's get this thing going. Have a good one.